I think one thing that's really important, everyone kind of always says this about Gen Z, and I think it's it's relevant to anyone, but I think even more so, especially in kind of today's world, I think helping them understand their role and the impact it has. Everyone says Gen Z wants purpose, like whatever, yes, but realistically not every company actually has a huge impact on the world, but what every job role does have is an impact.
Hello and welcome to the Plum Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and the founder of Access HR. In today's episode, I am joined by Shoshana Davis, and we're talking about all things early careers, specifically how do we understand and engage employees during the first few years of their professional journey. Shoshana, hi.
Hi, Georgia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me as a guest. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
So today we're going to talk about a topic that is really known for yourself in terms of early careers. And for yourself, you have a extensive background working with large organizations and workshops. And today we're really going to unpick into understanding and engaging early careers. And to set the scene a little bit with our audience, there's a question that I love to ask every single guest, and that is, was HR part of the plan or did it happen by chance?
Oh, good question. I would say yes and no. I originally started out, like my first job when I finished university, I worked in marketing. However, when I was at uni and throughout the whole process of kind of navigating my career and then starting my first job, I did have like an idea of, I'd love to maybe do something with this idea at some point, but it wasn't the right time. So kind of yes and no. My background was in marketing, but I kind of had an inkling that I would love to do something like this.
How did you make that transition into where you are now?
Oh God, well, I'll try and keep this short and sweet, but it's really not possible. So I guess to go back to the beginning, when I was like growing up at school, I wasn't very academic. I just loved the social aspect, to be fair. And I ended up failing my exams. And at that point, I was like, okay, oh crap, what do I do with myself? Because previously I'd wanted to study marketing at university. And I was kind of like, oh crap, well, what am I going to do? I somehow managed to like convince a uni to let me in, even though I didn't have the good grades. I've always had quite good negotiation skills, so even though I didn't have the grades. So I started that course, and when I joined, I kind of felt like I was at a disadvantage because I technically didn't really deserve to be there. So it was essentially my mission to get as much relevant kind of work experience as I could. And obviously for most uni students, when you want to find a job, you go to your career services. And I remember going to my career services and they were just not very helpful at all. It was just one like part of a hall in a room that was supposed to just serve the whole university. So the whole university must have done like 20 to 30 subjects and they weren't very helpful. So after that first meeting, I was kind of like, okay, I'm clearly going to have to navigate this process myself. And I basically hustled throughout my time at university. I worked every summer. I did a year in industry. In my final year of uni, I worked for like a startup. So luckily I was kind of able to actually graduate with 2.5 years of marketing experience, which is quite rare for most students. And so I achieved my goal. And when I finished, I kind of just thought, oh, well, I've learned so much in this process. I probably know more than the career services do at this point. Like I'd love to be able to do something with that information. But I was about to start my first full-time job and I didn't have the time. So I started, and I remember starting that job. And even though I had some of this prior work experience, just still the process of joining a big corporate organisation, especially as a young person, it just felt so overwhelming. And I was really confused. I didn't really know how to navigate that. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to have kind of difficult conversations and deal with feedback, etc. So then again, this idea came into the back of my head, but I just got on with my job essentially. And then fast forward a few years, COVID hit. And previously at my full-time job, I'd been doing lots of traveling and all of that stopped. So I had this extra time and I thought, okay, maybe this could be my time to do something a little bit extra. And I kind of ummed and ahed about it for like probably a good year and a half. You know, when you have an idea and you just spend way too long thinking about whether you should do it or not, and overthinking, when really you just need to get started. So I created an Instagram page, but I spent like a year not posting on it. And then I finally kind of got the guts to do so. And I just started posting career advice online for young people, as I knew there were lots of students and graduates that were kind of struggling at the time. And I was also sharing advice on like career progression for people that were in the first 1 to 3 years of their career. And this was like a good few years ago now. So at the time, even now it's quite common, but at the time, sharing content online, it was something that was quite new. So I did that consistently, and I was able to build a little bit of a community online through doing that, which I kind of actually monetized quite early on. So I think I had like 1,500 or 2,000 followers. So I was able to monetize it quite quickly. So I was doing like one-on-one sessions with people. I launched a stationery range at one point, which was like everything a young person could want starting their first job. And I had some digital products as well. And I did that for about 2.5 years while still working full-time in corporate. And within that time, I was still progressing in my corporate role, landed kind of leadership positions, were managing, working with teams globally, etc. And it kind of got to a point where I felt like there probably wasn't that much more progression for me at that company. It was a US company. Unless I kind of moved to the US and made it big, I didn't really want to do that. So I thought, okay, let me just, maybe, and I was burnt out from kind of running both for 2 years. So I thought, let me take a risk. I'm going to leave. I had just bought a house at the time as well. So I was like, crap, I need to make this work. And yeah, I've just basically spent the past kind of 18 months to nearly 2 years building out the kind of B2B side of my business, which is all about empowering young people with the skills and confidence to thrive at work, and also working very closely with managers and leaders and empowering them with the tools to engage and inspire the kind of next generation of leaders, which is young people. And yeah, that's it essentially. Long story short, that was quite long, but
I think it's really admirable though that you saw a gap yourself when you went to university. And I could totally relate to that. I didn't have any career advice when I was at school, going to uni, that it wasn't really a thing. And I struggled with that post-university. I was like, okay, now I need to get a job. Like, what the hell does that look like? What does that mean to me? How do I write a CV? The basics, I didn't get any advice on, which is really challenging. And it's how are we setting up our next generation for success? And you just started to talk about that a little bit as well. The work that you do predominantly is going into workplaces.
Yeah.
And with your workshops and giving them the skills to understand and engage early careers. So when I'm saying early careers, how would you define early careers?
Oh, really good question. Well, this interesting, because I do think it's changed. Well, for most of the companies that I work with, early careers to them means people that are early on in their career. So usually, and again, this can be, technically it can be any ages, but usually it's kind of people, school leavers. So it could be anyone from 16 to maybe like 21, 22, so a graduate. And typically those individuals are either in like an entry-level graduate job or a graduate scheme, or they're on an apprenticeship program. With that said, anyone of any age can be a graduate and get on a graduate program. Anyone of any age can be on an apprenticeship program. And actually now lots of these organizations are kind of expanding their early careers teams. So it's now like Future Talent or something like that. And it's taking into account people of all ages doing apprenticeships, because actually lots of companies are now using them as a tool to like upskill their existing employees. So, but a lot of the work I specifically do is focusing on helping young people that are at the very start of their careers. But with that said, some of the work does involve people of all ages as well. So yeah.
So those people who are really early in their careers, do you have any examples of any retention strategies that you found have really helped?
Well, I think just in general, companies do just tend to like really overthink what like young people want. I don't think I was saying this in another podcast I was on the other day, but I think the media don't really do a good job at helping, because every single day there's a news article about Gen Z this, Gen Z that, what Gen Z want, what they don't want. I think fundamentally young people actually just want the same things as everyone else. They want to earn enough money to have like a good standard of living. They want to enjoy the work they're doing. They want to feel supported and valued, and they want to be able to see good progression. So that would be my answer, to just focus on the fundamental things that everyone wants. Obviously, there are going to be intricacies within that, and chances are people of different generations have different ways of communicating those things. But you don't have to have the fanciest office. You don't have to have pizza every day or have a pool, like a pool table or whatever. I think those things are great, but they aren't really important unless some of those kind of fundamental things are covered.
The fundamentals that you said, I relate to. I'm not a Gen Z. I'm a millennial by 6 months, and everybody can relate to them. We want to feel valued, we want to feel trusted, and we want to thrive in a working environment. Sometimes as well, the titles of Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, Gen Alpha were categorized into boxes, when the reality is we should just be talking to our team and getting an understanding of like what's actually important to you. The media love Gen Z. There are so many things out there, and the reality is they're much more vocal, which I think is a really good thing, because it allows us to see for the future how we can actually create better places to work.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think the media helps at all. I think they definitely are vocal about things, and rightly so. I think part of it is down to, realistically, they have seen family members and family friends work their asses, I don't know if I'm work their asses off for 20 years, and reality not always have that much to show for it. Either be made redundant or laid off, or not have many savings, and it's just like, well, is it actually worth it? I think the things as they are need to change, and the young people that we have coming into the workforce at the moment, I think 2025, I believe, is the year. We've been saying it for like the past 3 years, but by 2025, Gen Z will account for like 30% of the workforce. We are now in 2025. So this is the future of the workforce. You can either sit there, keep moaning about them, not embrace it, and not have a great future talent pipeline, or you can actually start listening and, you know, be more open to doing things differently.
And Gen Z are the future of work as of now.
Yeah.
But we've also got Gen Alpha.
We do have Gen Alpha.
Who will be here so soon. And when 65% of Gen Alpha's jobs don't even exist yet, we need to start and put the systems in place, because if we don't, as employers, we're going to fall behind.
Yeah, 100%.
And if we're not prepared. What challenges are you seeing employers face when it comes to not adapting their workplaces for early talent?
Well, I think a big disconnect I'm seeing at the moment, and I don't want to focus too much on generations because lots of it is generalizations, but I do think there is a little bit of a generational disconnect at the moment, and I think the media has played a huge role in that. And it's now almost as if young people are coming into work and they know that people already have a specific thought in their mind about how they're going to be. And then I think managers and leaders are kind of subconsciously, without realizing, also having some of those thoughts. So, for example, like really simple things, like lots of young people coming into the working world now at the moment, they were studying during lockdown, during COVID. So lots of them missed out on work experience opportunities. Lots of them were learning online, and they maybe didn't develop some of those skills that are typically developed at that age. And for lots of them, this is genuinely their first job. Like some of them have even struggled to find part-time work, and they'll come into a job, and I'll speak to lots of managers and I'll hear things like, oh yeah, you know, they're not interested. We join meetings and like their camera's never on, or they don't speak up. And to them, they'll be like, oh yeah, they're not interested. Like they're clearly entitled. They clearly don't want to be here. Basically the wording that you see in the media. But the reality is, you know, has anyone told them that they need to put their cameras on? Because their experience is based on learning at university or school during COVID, where everyone joined a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams meeting. No one had their camera on. No one said anything. It was just like 200 people watching a teacher or watching a lecturer. So they don't know any different. Or has anyone like asked them how they feel? Like they probably don't want to say anything because they might not have the confidence to, because this is their first job and they don't know how to act. So it's kind of, there's lots of assumptions that are going around, And I'm just seeing that, you know, different generations and even managers and employees, they're not really talking to each other. They're just making assumptions and they're kind of getting frustrated with each other. So it is very interesting.
One of the biggest mistakes you can make at work is assuming.
Yes, exactly. Assuming they know these simple things like how to write an email or should their camera be on, or it's just... And then managers or even sometimes people on their team, they're like, oh, you know, when I was a graduate or when I started my first job, I knew these things. But it's just like, well, it's a different time. Like, did you start your first job during COVID? No. It's just different times. And I think in general, as humans, we also always tend to think of our past selves in a more positive light anyway. We'll be like, oh, we knew these, even if you may not have, you'll just think you did. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I had very similar as well. I remember my first ever job, I didn't know what a tax code was. Nobody had ever told me what a tax code was. When the tax came out and then I was floored. I was like, what is this? What's going on?
Were you on emergency tax?
Yes.
Oh,
I
my
hate
God.
that. So I was like, what is happening? I've worked so hard. And then after being on emergency tax, I got a new tax code come through. And again, I thought, what is this? I've never had a job before. What on earth is going on? And I wish I'd have had that extra intentional onboarding for somebody who is super early in their career, because I completely agree. When I started in my career, Teams and virtual meetings weren't on the agenda. That changed very quickly after COVID. But I wouldn't have known to put my camera on.
Yeah, exactly. Or like things like, oh, you know, we can't believe they don't know how to send an email. Well, they do know how to send an email, but they don't communicate via email to their friends, do they? And at university, yes, you might have an email account, but you don't really use it. It's just like lecturers email you things. So they do know how to send an email, but they may not know how to write it. Or I receive lots of emails from new starters and there's no subject line. And to be honest, that is my pet hate, because if an email has no subject line, I'll just miss it. So yeah, they don't know how to do these things because they've never done them. Like, I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand that.
But what suggestion would you give to anybody who is thinking, right, okay, I want to widen my talent pool? What suggestion would you give to somebody who is looking to hire for either an apprenticeship or an internship or a graduate scheme that they can then overcome that challenge?
Well, I think first of all, I'm not saying that every graduate or apprentice doesn't know how to do these things. I don't want to make generalizations, but lots of them don't. So I think just be prepared for that to maybe be a reality. And either kind of pre-boarding. So actually lots of the companies I work with, they do a bunch of stuff pre-boarding. So before they even join, lots of them will bring them in for a day to like get excited about joining, like see the office, like learn how it works. And then we'll run a few sessions on some of these basic things, like how to write an email, but also other things like how to get in a good routine so they're not gonna keep going to bed at 2 a.m. and so they can actually wake up the next day, or how to understand their payslip, those type of things. So you can definitely do things to prepare them beforehand when they even join. Of course, then at onboarding you can cover lots of these things. However, be mindful, as usually there's lots of information and most of it's probably going to be forgotten about anyway. So it's like, how can you, I guess, beyond onboarding, and actually that's something I'm looking at in a lot of the work I'm doing as well, how can we create that reinforced learning? So visiting that information at different points in time at different mediums, so the knowledge and skills actually stick and they can build them. So I think just approaching the whole recruitment, hiring, onboarding and having them process of that, you know, lots of companies I see haven't kind of adapted in a post-COVID world. So they're still expecting the same level of like skills and experience for young people coming in that they would have pre-COVID. And then they're acting surprised. But the reality is it's not the same, it's different. So I think just adapting from that would be one of my top tips. Yeah.
I love that you said around basically like a staggered approach as well. Onboarding now for any new company you go to can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, so much.
It's a lot of information, never mind someone who is more fresh in their career at the same time. You spoke about pre-onboarding and I love the examples of bringing them in, doing a couple of workshops to prepare them. What impact have you seen from candidates when you have provided that as a pre-onboarding experience?
Well, I think the pre-boarding thing is really, really important. I think, first of all, I could never say this word, but lots of the organisations I work with, they don't have high rates, but they have rates of renages, which is obviously when someone says yes to a job offer and then they pull out at a later date, especially as lots of these organisations have kind of big programs. And the reality of, I mean, the job market is brutal, I'm sure you know at the moment. So lots of these grads and apprentices are applying for like 30 plus, some of them 50 jobs.
Yeah.
So they're interviewing for lots at the same time, and they will just accept one offer, and then if they get a better offer, they'll say no to it. So they help with renege rates, because you bring people in, you get them invested in the business, you get them excited for joining, so they're less likely to kind of pull out. But also in terms of confidence rates around things like nerves, at the beginning of a bunch of the sessions I do at pre-boarding, it's like, how are you feeling? Like, are you confident about starting work? And normally at the beginning everyone's like, no. By the end, 100% yes. Or like, do you know the steps you actually need to take to set yourself up for success between now and joining? And they're like, no. And when we go through even simple things like, okay, this is how you get, because they would have all been on summer, they're going to bed at like 2 a.m. every night. So it's like, okay, how can you get out of that? How can you get in a good routine? How can you look after your mental health? This is how much you're going to get paid. Like, how can you deal with it? Or even things like, these are some of the tools you're going to be using. Like, these are some basics of how to go and write an email. But now is July and you don't start till September. So go practice. So yeah, some really good results around kind of confidence and general prep, so that when they actually join, they're ready to get going. You don't have to start from scratch on day one. And also, another thing that's some of the companies are doing pre-boarding is there are different platforms they're using to kind of drip feed them information before they join. So it's not just bringing them in and like delivering a session. It's like, oh, before you join, these are the 10. I mean, lots of companies have things like this already, but probably not in as much detail. These are the 5 videos you need to watch that are going to help set you up for success in terms of, oh, this is what your first day is going to be like. Who are you going to meet? And it sounds really silly, but like lots of them are super nervous. And I think since COVID, social media, like etc., like anxiety, I mean, this is a mental health podcast, so I'm sure you know about mental health, but especially in young people, it's super sky high right now, and lots of them are very anxious. So anything you can do to remove any kind of anxiety from the process, I would say is a good thing as well.
Have you had any feedback from the candidate experience of how having a pre-onboarding program has helped them to feel more comfortable at work? Have you had positive feedback? I assume it sounds like it would be great. I wish I'd have had it.
Yeah, so I get a lot of the data like kind of during the pre-boarding stage. So the main things I'm measuring at the moment are kind of confidence levels, like work readiness. I haven't measured kind of comfort, but that's a good idea. I'd like to do that. But yeah, those are some of the things I'm measuring at the moment.
I just think that could be a really good insight.
Yeah.
Because I was so nervous to have my first ever adulting job as well. Like for me, I had done hospitality when I was younger, and I think a lot of us go into that space, but going into an office, especially from university when life is a breeze, very, very different.
Yeah, it is very different.
So for today, we're talking around understanding and engaging people who are quite early in their professional career. Let's talk about how we can engage them. So we've gone through the pre-onboarding, we're understanding them more. Now we want to keep them. Are there any particular strategies or programs, I guess, that you found to be really beneficial in terms of an engagement perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things I work on at the moment is empowering line managers specifically to understand and engage their young people better. So yeah, this is a topic I could talk about all day. I personally think the impact of your manager, especially your first manager, is so important but often forgotten about. And the impact of your first manager can have a precedence of your entire career. So I think for lots of organizations they don't realize, but it is actually really important that you get it right from the start. And I think one first step towards doing that is helping your managers, because realistically managers are busy people. Managing is just one part of their job. They have a whole other job to be doing, so any support and guidance you can give them is really helpful. So in terms of some of the things that covers, it covers loads of stuff. It definitely covers things like kind of how some of these things like impact of the pandemic, comparison on like social media, which is just creating completely unrealistic career expectations for young people, and mental health, how some of these things are actually showing up at work. It touches on the kind of work readiness piece, and you know, some of the behaviors we may see that we could think is this, but it's actually this. It also talks about kind of best practices for delivering feedback, as obviously there are lots of kind of different feedback models, but it more specifically focuses on the fact that for many of them, they aren't actually going to be used to receiving feedback. So it's really actually important to normalize the process first. And it of course talks about how to give good feedback, but it also talks about how to normalize it in terms of, because for a young person starting work, and I remember feeling like this, a lot of the time you can feel like you're the only one that's like receiving feedback, and a lot of the time the feedback feels negative, but you also never see anyone else getting it. So it's like, how can you bring that as part of your team so it's something that's kind of very normalized and helps them actually become more comfortable with it. It also talks about kind of coaching and mentoring, but mainly some of the differences between actually managing a young person specifically in 2025 and how the impacts of kind of social media, pandemic and cost of living. And then also touches upon some kind of generational pieces as well, and mapping out the kind of different generations. And fundamentally they do want the same things, but they do have some different attitudes towards work and different kind of communication styles. So really explaining those as well.
What response do you get from line managers during that training session?
It's normally really, really positive. I think for me, I've noticed that it's really about how you're positioning it, and positioning it as a development opportunity for them. It's not this is how you do this, or you need to treat your young people like this. No, it's a development opportunity for you to help you become a better manager. And when it's positioned in the right way, people will come and they look forward to coming, and people always enjoy it regardless. I get loads of positive feedback. I also get lots of, oh my God, this was really helpful for my job, but also I now understand my child so much better. And I'm just like, oh yeah, well, that's like not what this was for, but I'm glad it's helped you understand your child better. And they're like, oh yeah, it makes sense now, like they do lots of these things as well, and I just thought they weren't interested or they were being lazy, but now it makes so much sense. I think in general it just helps them have a bit more empathy. I think empathy just goes such a long way. And it is true, like lots of people that have been working for longer, they genuinely have no idea what it's actually like to be a young person in today's world, especially when lots of these basic things that have been promised to you by society, if you follow all of the basic steps, like, oh, okay, go to school, get good grades, go to university, or some people don't go to university these days, but whatever, you do all these basic steps and then you're expected to, have a really good job and buy a house. And it's like lots of these things, just you promise them from day one, but it's just so much harder to achieve them in today's world with cost of living, etc. But they struggle with that. So I think just giving that context really, really goes a long way. And really good data. I just finished up a 6-month program with one of my clients. So we went through a whole range of things, and confidence levels have increased by like over 50 to 60%. Ability to like understand them better have increased by like 70%. I'm just trying to think of some of the other things we measured. I was just looking at it early. Ability to kind of coach and mentor and tailor that approach to actually a young person. Massive increases. So some really good results.
And also, most leaders that I speak to are really open to understanding their team. And I can, because the reason why I asked that question, and I was smiling as you were talking, because I knew that would be the answer. At the same time, we want to create great places to work, and it also benefits them if they understand their people better, because then they can continue to do their job without any disruptions or anything of the sort. And more often than not, it comes down to communication. You were talking then around the differences, and some people saying, that wasn't something that I faced when I was starting out in my career or I was younger. And you're absolutely right. Technology has changed so much. Now we have instant messages, get that dopamine hit for feedback. You were talking about how people don't necessarily, or let me phrase that better, they haven't been exposed to feedback, whereas some people have been exposed to feedback face to face. And that's always been the norm because technology wasn't available. Now technology allows for feedback to be sent on Slack, on Teams. It is that quick instant message, and sometimes we don't know how to interpret that. Emojis, memes, when they come in with feedback, sometimes
such a good point,
they make me a bit nervous. And when people, things like if you say something in a Slack message and someone huddles you straight away, because we've not had that communication of what that means, sometimes it can feel quite like, oh gosh, quite overwhelming. And I love how you're educating and really supporting on that growth, because that is how we're going to keep our talent if we understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though, because I think it also massively depends, and this is just a general thing, but it depends on the culture of the organisation as well, and whether they kind of prioritise development or not, because, you know, there are some companies that don't, or they say it's important, but like customers come above everything. So then it's like, well, people aren't attending, or they'll make up that they have a customer meeting so they can't come. So, but when people, for most people, they want to come, and for everyone, even if they didn't want to come, they get huge value from it.
Let's go beyond the training.
Yes.
That we're doing. So we're supporting line managers, you're putting all the strategies in place. How do we go beyond that to engage people who are quite early in their career?
I think one thing that's really important, everyone kind of always says this about Gen Z, and I think it's it's relevant to anyone, but I think even more so, especially in kind of today's world, I think helping them understand their role and the impact it has. Everyone says Gen Z wants purpose, like whatever, yes, but realistically not every company actually has a huge impact on the world, but what every job role does have is an impact. And I think a lot of the time that isn't explained properly, and you'll maybe be starting your first job and you'll be given these tasks which seem quite boring, quite meaningless to you, because no one's actually taken the time or the context to explain, like, you need to do this because this helps this team or our team do this, which then contributes to the wider organisation, the wider team's goals. So I think helping them really understand the impact their role has. Yes, not every role is going to be changing the world, and that's fine, but they at least want to know why they're doing things, because otherwise it's just like, I'm filling in Excel spreadsheets every day and I don't know why my job's boring and I feel like I'm having no contribution to society. So I think just taking the time to explain like the impact of their role on the wider business and the wider team is so important. And I think also setting really, really clear expectations of what's expected and needed of them from the very, very get-go. Again, coming back to the assumptions piece, a lot of the time, because assumptions are made by maybe managers about what they know or what they don't know, a lot of the time expectations aren't set. So when there are differences or when things don't happen, that's where issues start. And in fact, 90%, 99% actually of the challenges I see are always down to expectations not being clearly set at the beginning. So I think expectations, so kind of both sides know like what is expected and how they'll work together. And I think also around progression, of course, everyone wants to progress. And I think young people are super motivated to progress, partly because they feel like they are still playing catch up from COVID. They lost 2-3 years of their lives and they're still playing catch up, but also because they have the ability to be able to open TikTok and see what every single other young person their age is doing, what they're earning. Oh, this person started 6 months ago working for a startup and now they're a manager. Why is that not me? And they don't really understand that, working for a 5-person startup, progression is going to be quicker than working for like a 3,000 person or a Fortune 500 company. So I think explaining those things and also just being really clear how you progressed, expected timelines, expected behaviors, etc., goes such a long way. And I think, similar to what I said before, just to help them feel valued, supported, and understood. And anyone, regardless of age or generation, when those things are met, they are going to want to stay. And of course, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Things like pay, of course, are very important, especially in a cost of living crisis, especially when it's so hard for like everyone in general, but especially a young person when you're first starting out. Your salary is normally not that great. I know graduates and apprentices who are living in cities and like 70 to 80% of their salary is going on bills, etc. They don't have much left at the end of the month. And then we have employers wondering why they are not bringing their full selves to work, or they're not super motivated. Well, because they're stressing about how they're going to pay their bills, because it's impacting their mental health. So of course they're not going to be 100% at work. So I'm not going to lie and say salary is not important, because it is. If you pay. I've seen, so you've probably seen these on LinkedIn. I saw a post yesterday and I keep seeing them all the time about someone wrote that they're recruiting for like a job, an entry level job for like 22k.
I see these a lot.
Yeah, and they were saying like, if you recruit for these type of jobs, like you shouldn't. And I kind of agree. And then you get all the comments of like, wow, when I first started off, my salary was 15k. Yeah, how many years? That was 20 years ago, okay?
Yeah.
When you could like buy a house for like 50k or whatever. So I just feel like a lot of people have this mindset of, oh, well, you know, I started out on this, so that's going to be okay for someone. It's just so much more expensive. It's a completely different day and age. And I'm not going to just beat around the bush and act like salary doesn't matter, because realistically, it does matter. And even if you're doing all those things and your employees like are stressed about money and they can't afford to live, then obviously they're going to leave if they can earn more money and like not be stressed. So
things are different.
yeah.
And people need to get on board with that as well. One thing that I love to say this, and I see it all the time, is it's not an HR problem, it's a communication problem. Because I have it where team members will come forward to me and like managers, and they will be like, you know, something's going on, they're not performing, their conduct needs questioning. And it's like, okay, why are they not performing? Well, they should be doing this, this, and this. Okay, we told them. Have we communicated with them on the expectations?
No.
Well, you know, when I was in that role, I could do it. You're assuming. It goes back to that assumption that we were talking about. And a way of overcoming that, what we're doing now, is rather than having a job description, which is so boring, uninspiring, unfulfilling, moving more to a role and impact framework where we're adding in that impact piece that you were just talking about. And not everyone wants to change the world, but they want to know how their day-to-day is adding value and impact to the business goals. And how can we expect them to know that if we're not articulating that and keeping up with it?
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I've got one final question as a roundup for today.
Okay.
Thinking about your career,
Yes.
what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
I think there were lots of times when I was like starting out in my career, when I failed my exams, when I was getting rejected from lots of jobs, when I was confused in the corporate world and I didn't feel like I had much support, because I didn't actually mention this, but my first job from graduating, I joined like an all-male team of like 6 males and they were great, but most of the time they weren't even in the office and I was just in the office on my own. And I remember I felt stressed and worried a lot at the beginning. So I think just everything's going to work out. Like keep doing what you're doing, keep working hard. And I think mindset is just so important. And that's one thing that's really like kept me going and like helps me build my business, is like believing like that it's going to be fine and you're going to make things work. Because once you believe that, like that's your mindset. The second you let those negative thoughts come in or make yourself believe that it's not going to happen, then you've lost it. It's not. Do you know what I mean? So I think just trusting myself more and trusting that it's going to be okay, which is really generic, and I wish I could have said something better, but
I think a lot of people can relate to that at the same time. Like mindset is huge. I think I could have definitely done with that advice myself, and even still now, like I still have those days. That's the reality. It also allows us to grow. But I love that piece. I know you said it was cliche, but it's a really important message.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I have really enjoyed it.